From the House of the Temple on 16th Street in our nation's capital, this is the Tyler's Place Podcast, a podcast by Freemasons, for Freemasons, brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the World. I'm Maynard Edwards, 32nd degree KCCH, Scottish Rite Freemason, your host here, and also check out our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Scottish Rite Masons. Lots of great content there. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to the channel and consider joining our Lost Media Archive. For just $2 a month, you can help preserve Scottish Rite media, film, video, audio recordings, a ton of Scottish Rite media from over the past 100 years, and we want to share it with you, and we want to digitize it, and we need your help. So check that out when you go to youtube.com/Scottish Rite Masons. Also, don't forget, check out our other podcast, which is the Scottish Rite Journal podcast. You can listen to that wherever you're listening to this podcast. We're virtually on every platform, and it's a weekly audio presentation of the Scottish Rite Journal. Sometimes you don't have time to read the journal. That's okay. We've got you covered each and every week, a new article for you to listen to, whether you're driving or mowing the lawn or washing the dishes or just waiting around at the doctor's office. You can listen to the Scottish Rite Journal. Our email address is podcast@scottishrite.org. Here in the House of the Temple, we are blessed to have an incredible team of professionals that does so much great work to help keep the fraternity humming right along. And we have a lot of unsung heroes, people who do incredible work on behalf of the Scottish Rite and on behalf of Freemasonry, and they don't get the notice that they deserve. Brother Bob Weatherford, 32nd degree KCCH, is one of those unsung heroes. Brother Bob, if you hear that name, you're thinking, Bob Weatherford, that sounds familiar. Well, if you're a Scottish Rite Mason in the Southern Jurisdiction, you've gotten a birthday email from Brother Bob. And if you haven't, it means we don't have your email address correct. So send me an email, podcast@scottishrite.org, and we'll get that fixed for you. But one of the truly remarkable things that Bob focuses on during his workday is he reconnects Scottish Rite Masons with the fraternity. You guys know that there are brothers who, they were there one day and then they weren't. Bob finds those guys and gets them to reconnect with the Scottish Rite and get them to come back to the brotherhood. And I think what he does is just so extraordinary, and I'm so proud to know him and to just play a small part in some of the work that he does. And he's joining me here on the line now via Zoom, and I'm sure he's going to give me a hard time for giving him these accolades, but they're well-deserved, Bob. And let's start kind of from square one. What's your actual job title?
I am a regional membership manager.
Whenever I talk about anything great that the membership department of the Scottish Rite is doing, the first words out of my mouth are Bob Weatherford, because you've single-handedly brought back more Scottish Rite Masons to good standing than any human being on planet Earth. I mean, last year in 2022, do you know what your body count was, so to speak?
I haven't figured it up. It's in excess of 500 for 2022, but I haven't figured it up.
So that's 500. Just think about that, guys. When you're listening, that's 500 Scottish Rite Masons who had separated from the fraternity for one reason or another. And then they came back because Bob got in touch with them and said, "Hey, brother, we want you to come back. You're important to us." And I wanted to talk about what it is that you do, why it is you think people move away from the fraternity, and then what the average Mason, whether it's Blue Lodge or York Rite or Scottish Rite or whatever you're involved in, what they can do to make that change with those brothers. So, I mean, I guess let's start at the beginning. When you're talking to folks, what's the number one reason, or what are the couple of reasons they got disconnected from the fraternity to begin with? Because we looked at this together a couple of years ago and we found a couple of different reasons. What's the biggest now?
I got to be honest with you, Maynard. I really can't answer that question, because a lot of guys start to tell me why they left, and I usually stop them and say, "Look, man, I'm not concerned with so much with the past. Let's look at the future together, and let's get you back in good standing." So I haven't really focused at all on finding out why they left. Now, the ones who do tell me, and I let them go through their story, normally it's because it was something that they mentioned that was traumatic, medical, something happened, a divorce something happened with one of their kids, something happened with their job. If they start in with that, of course, I'm not going to stop them and say, hey, it doesn't matter to me what happened. I'm going to listen it out and try to talk to them about it. And those are the ones that talk to me the most. I mean, there are a few guys. I mean, you leave the call thinking, man, I just wish the Valley had known, uh, and we wouldn't be in this position. We could have helped this man.
I think a lot of times guys are sort of ashamed to reach out and ask for help, or maybe they don't think about calling the Valley and saying, hey, brother, I lost my job, or, God forbid, I found out a relative has cancer and I've got all my funds are going to have to go to X, Y, or Z, or, I've got my own health issue. I think, do you think people just kind of get ashamed? I mean, we're men, we get proud, I guess.
I think some of it is exactly that. Pride gets in the way, but I also think that some of it is if a guy is not like you're very active in your valleys. You just are. You go to the meetings, you go to the reunions, you go to everything.
Yeah.
You're involved with everything. But when a guy is not as involved as you, the only time he may be hearing from the Valley is when a news notice or just a newsletter comes in, by email. So he may not know of a brother to go to tell him something is happening in their life. And that's why I believe that in all honesty, before a guy becomes a Scottish Rite Mason, before he ever takes this conferred the fourth degree, we ought to be asking him why he's taking the Scottish Rite degrees, why he chose to do it, and ask him what he expects to gain from it, and then explain to him what the Scottish Rite would expect of him, with it being an all volunteer order. But there are still things, maintaining your membership, letting somebody know, knowing who to talk to. There are so many things that we should be telling him or expected of him, and showing him, and in the very least, showing him that there is a correct and proper, honorable way to exit a fraternity should you decide to step away, rather than just leaving your Valley hanging with the paying your dues for you for 2 years.
How often are you getting that response from a guy who just says, no, Masonry wasn't really for me, or Scottish Rite really wasn't for me? Does that happen a lot, or not all that often?
It happens a lot that the guys, I shouldn't say, I don't get the Scottish Rite wasn't for me, but I do get a lot of, well, I'm not able to participate because I live 80 miles away, and if I can't participate, I just don't want to be a member. So in that respect, I get that it's not for me, but yeah, I always let them know that it's not about how many meetings you've been to or how many reunions you've been to. It's about maintaining your membership. You if you can do that, you just have to remember that about 10% of the Valley is all that you're ever going to see at a meeting usually. And if you think about it in the terms of the other 90% who aren't there, paid 90% of the light bill for that meeting to take place, then you know that you're just as active as those 10% are.
I remember when you and I first started getting into this, I think it was back in 2017, we first started looking at it. And, the reasons were, like you said, a lot had to do with trauma, a lot had to do with people moving, but there were very few people who just said, nah, I just don't care for it. I don't like it.
That's right.
Hardly anybody.
That's right. Yeah.
Maybe one out of 25, maybe, but most of them, it was lost my job, or somebody's sick, or kids going to college and I just can't afford it, and things like that. And it does make you a little sad, because a single phone call or to the Valley or to a brother probably could have prevented that. And I think
that's right.
They don't know, just like you said, they don't know who to call if they're not super active. If you're not an active, very active brother, you might not know who the secretary is at any given time to be able to give that guy a call. So
that's right.
Interesting. It's
that's right. And that's why I believe that now, with, like, for instance, the birthday emails that I send out, well, you well know how that works. And sometimes I get back questions or like, hey, I would like to demit, or comments like that should go to the Valley, and I think they send it back to me because they didn't know how to get to the Valley. Other than physically walking in, they didn't know how to get there.
I too wonder what is happening that with that brother, further on in his life, that he's not calling the man that signed his petition. I just signed my son's petition. He's coming in on my Blue Lodge. If he don't pay his dues and something's going sideways with him, you can bet that they're going to call me on top of calling him. So, they'll know for me to reach out to them and be like, boy, pay your dues, or, I'm gonna put my foot in your butt.
As well they should.
I know there's all kinds of restoration programs all across the country, and some participate and some don't. So I don't want to get into the specifics of that and have some valley say, well, our valley doesn't do that, and then, well, this valley does. Everybody does that just a little bit differently. But generally speaking, would you say that a brother who wants to come back, it's relatively easy to get back to the Scottish Rite?
There have been multiple instances, and I've the shortest time it's taken me is about under 10 minutes from the time the guy said I would like to be restored in the Scottish Rite until I had him restored. The 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 the, the time it took could have been shorter if he could have logged in faster to pay the restoration fee.
See,
I was sitting right there.
people,
So yeah,
if you've ever been on a Zoom call with Bob, like one of our workshops, or maybe you saw him speak at a lodge or something somewhere. In fact, I was with him in lodge, in my valley, Susquehanna Valley, a couple weeks ago at this point, and I think you restored a guy while we were sitting there in lodge. You did it by email.
I did.
You often do one or two while we're on it. We're on a Zoom call with Valley secretaries. We can be on with 100 guys, and I see Bob typing, and I'm like, he's restoring someone right now. I'm always, after it's over, I'm like, how many did you get? He's like, I only got 3 in that meeting. I was a little disappointed.
Yeah, it seems to work out that way. That when we're doing something else, and if you see me typing, that's what I'm usually doing. And look, hey, I want to point out one thing. Most people don't know her, but we have to sing the praises of Judy Fletcher a little bit.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Because what I do couldn't happen. Well, I mean, it could, but it would be a lot slower if it weren't for Judy Fletcher. Because behind the scenes, Judy sends that man his card. She gets everything ready in the records, and so I couldn't do it without her. And heck, I bet there's a lot of your job you couldn't do without her too.
Oh yeah. What's your approach when you reach out to guys? You get a list of brothers that have been suspended for a couple of years, and in some cases, it's been decades. How do you start that conversation? Because I think a lot of guys, a lot of Blue Lodges, a lot of Scottish Rite Valleys, a lot of York Rite organizations, they're interested in doing this, and they just don't know where to begin.
Well, the first you have to identify and bring up your target that you're looking for. I want to first say that anybody prior in the Scottish Rite, anyway, prior to 2000 or 2001, that I've reinstated. I think 1979 now is the longest to go suspension that I've restored. But anybody who is pre 2001 or 2000, that's almost always by word of mouth. Because I have no way of knowing. I have no way of searching out a guy who was suspended back then.
Because he's not in our computer.
So it's always word of mouth. Like a guy got reinstated, or somebody who was reinstated actually tells a guy about the program the Spring Council does, and that's how they get to me. Those guys, and have to build a new record and go through. Those usually take about an hour to do one of those, but it's well worth it. Now, as far as for suspensions and restorations, it's real easy. I just pull a list of people to reach out to, and that would be a lot easier if we had current information when a guy joins. If we had good information and that stayed that way, for instance, the email address. I'm only able to really do this in mass by emails. So the pool of people I can reach out to is almost limited by how many email addresses we have on file. So if we don't update email addresses, well, and we lose that guy, then, well, I'm going to have to research him. And that's why we also have like David Yarborough or Donald Joe in Long Beach that's helping me research through a few computer programs to get new email addresses to reach out to people. But I reach out to them by email. Sometimes they call me after I reached out to an email, and sometimes they just respond, and everything is done by email uh, or phone. One of those two things happen, and usually it's email. But some guys prefer to talk on the phone.
When I think about my Scottish Rite class, or even I think about the group of men I came in with into my Blue Lodge, because I came in a very large class in my Blue Lodge. It was 17 guys came in one day. It was a big class of people, and we went in long form with the first and second, and then we did a mass raising at the Grand Lodge with 300 other guys. So people who criticize 1 day Masons, I'm sort of a day and a half Mason. I always say it doesn't matter how a man came in; it matters what happens after he gets in the door. And
That's right.
if he's engaged and he's active, that's more important than how he got his degrees. Obviously, there's a benefit to getting those degrees in long form, and it's a lot more powerful than not. But once you're in the door, it's about what happens then, because there's just as many people that were raised the old-fashioned way who never show up again after they pass their third-degree catechism or what have you. I wonder about those guys that I sat next to on that day. I know one of them is still a member, but he's not very active. And I'm not quite sure what happened to the other one. Is it our job as Masons, do you think, to kind of say, I should reach out to that guy? What do you see the role of Joe Mason, he's Blue Lodge or just a regular Scottish Rite Mason? He's not a secretary. He's not an officer. What role can another brother play in helping to bring men back to the fraternity or reconnecting them?
Well, that's real for me. That's simple. Um, if you go to a meeting or if you go into the valley, uh, go to the valley secretary or the personal representative or the membership chairman, whoever you've got available to you to go talk to, and say, look, here's what I would like to help. I think I can help. Can you give me a list of people to reach out to see how they're doing? And that list doesn't have to be people who are behind in their dues. I mean, that's the sad part. We shouldn't wait till somebody's behind in their dues to reach out to them. So anybody in the valley, any elder or brother, call him, ask him how he's doing. Hey, are you able to shovel your snow? Are you able to mow your yard? Are you able to get to a meeting? Can I help you with a ride? I'm younger and I can see at night, but I know you can't. Any of that stuff is would keep a guy engaged, and I can promise you that if you ever help somebody masonically one time, the feeling is such a thing that it's addictive and you'll want to do it again. And if everybody could feel that just at once, then we wouldn't have an issue. We are always looking in membership services for someone in every or in each valley who is willing to take and volunteer his time a little bit each week or each month, an hour here, hour there, to do exactly what I'm doing, and I'm always there to help you. If a guy wants to do that, if he will give me send me an email or call me. Everybody has my phone number by now. If you got an email address on file, I know you do. But if a guy will call me, I'm always willing to help him. Call membership services. Judy will know how to help you too. She'll get you to the right person. But we're always looking for somebody who's willing to help us do that. And it has to go down to the valley level, because that's brother to brother, and that's the most important connection. It can't always be from the East Coast to the West Coast, a guy making a phone call. It needs to be a guy that's standing there that you can look him in the eye.
When you talk about trying to bring a brother back, and I've heard this, and I know you've heard this, and I've heard it all across the fraternity. I'm not calling that guy. He's a bum. He didn't pay his dues. He's a bum.
Mm-hmm.
What's your response to that?
Well, first, my response to that is I learned the hard way that you can never, and I mean never, should you ever try to judge the choices a brother made when you don't know the options that brother had to choose from. In other words, you have not walked in his shoes, so you don't know if he was choosing between lodge dues or Scottish Rite dues or putting shoes on little Sarah or feeding little Johnny. I mean, you don't know what he had to choose from. It could have been he had to have the money for gas to get to work just to be able to to feed his family. and we forget that, and we go into, well, he didn't pay his dues as a bum. Now, on the reverse side of that, we talked about it before, and he should have, if he couldn't pay his dues, he should have let somebody know, and that's where it comes into, well, we haven't done a great job either of letting new brothers know who to talk to if they do have a problem. But I never go into, when I email or if I call a guy, I make it perfectly clear that I'm not calling about dues, because I don't even mention money. And the reason I don't do that, Maynard, is because, look, if I called you and you were behind in your dues, you already know you're behind in your dues. So there's no reason for me to mention it to you. I should give you a reason to want to come back, rather than say, hey, would you mind sending me some money so I can bring you back? Because that's not the right reason. And so if anybody hears this podcast and you ever get suspended and you hear from me, I promise you, when I call you, I'm not calling about money. I'm calling about you. And if you want to talk, that's fine. If you don't want to come back, that's fine. Uh, I'm going to do everything I can to get you back. But I will not call you about money. And I think that's where we've lost it. It's become a matter of the money, and I understand it to a certain extent, because the light bill is higher, the fuel bill is higher, the cost of maintaining your building is higher.
And
Everything is going up.
in all honesty, and I know you know this to be true as well. If we look out at what things cost in 2023 versus how much dues are for any Masonic organization, our dues are far too low to be able to keep up with the level of inflation. So,
Sure.
we get it. Absolutely, we understand.
Well, we get it, and it's kind of like a mouse wheel going round and round, because if you have to raise the dues, then so many guys leave, and that leaves the pool of people paying dues to pay the bills that much smaller. Now, next time the dues got to go up again, because there's less people to spread the load out on. And that's the reason I was telling you earlier that my philosophy is, any man that maintains his membership is just as active as anybody else, because his participation is his paying his dues. And to me, there's different ways of participating. You can be a guy who has all the money in the world. You never have to go to a meeting, but hey, you can do a lot with your money. You can be a guy who has no money, but you have plenty of time, and your time can do as much as that guy's money. So there's so many different ways a guy can be active, but none of them include letting yourself go to suspension.
I just became a Blue Lodge secretary. I left the East, and I went 3 feet to the left in Maryland.
Oh, wow.
It might be different in other states, but I went, in Maryland, I left of the Worshipful Masters, where the secretary is. And so one of the things I added to our trestle board and to all of our emails is, they can pay their dues through Venmo or through PayPal or all the different ways. But I put on the bottom there, if you're having some trouble paying your dues for whatever reason, and it's underlined, whatever reason, please reach out, and we won't let any brother be suspended because he's having trouble paying his dues. And
Right.
It's just a single line, and it's in there. And I know there's probably some grouchy past masters who are going to complain about that. But my obligation, my point of view on this is, and you and I have talked about this, is my obligation doesn't say anything about dues. And if I can help a brother, whether it's we all pass a hat around, or whether it's, I say, hey, pay half now, half later, or give me $10 every month, or whatever I have to do to help that brother stay in good standing, I think that's within the length of my cable toe to do. That's what our obligation said, is to, to help a brother as long as it's not injury to yourself. And I think we're forgetting that part for the sake of money. And I get it. Bills have to be paid. The lights have to be turned on. It's expensive to buy meatball subs for everybody every week. There's no doubt about that. But
That's right.
the obligation, and what we knelt at the altar and said in front of God and everybody, was, I will help this brother when he needs help. And if he's willing to reach to me and say, I lost my job, or like you said, little Sarah needs shoes this month, I'm going to help him. It's just gonna, and that's the way it is.
And that's what we're supposed to do. And
Yeah.
then, and as soon as we get back to doing that, I'm always, I have to think of things in a way that my simpleton brain understands it. I really do. So I
Stop
always
that.
think of things in basically a euphemism, and that's the reason, everybody always talks about the old thing of the definition of insanity, doing the
Yeah.
same thing however many times and getting the same result. Well, I look at that and I think that sometimes when people say, well, we don't want to do that because we tried that. Sometimes to achieve what you had in the past, you need to remember that maybe you need to do what you did in the past. And by that, I mean, maybe we need to figure out where the mason left masonry and put him back in there. And that starts in the lodge. It always starts in the lodge, not in the Scottish Rite, in the lodge. And if you've got a great foundation you're standing on in the lodge, then it's going to carry through no matter what you do.
When we first started looking at these restorations, it was 2000. I think it was December of 2017. We really started cranking on it.
It
And
was.
that was before all the other, YouTube and all that other stuff that we have going on now. But we looked at it and we saw the biggest spike in people getting separated from the fraternity was in 2010. And the reason was it takes 2 years to be suspended from the Scottish Rite. If you stop paying your dues today, it's 2 full years, more or less, that you can be suspended according to the statutes. And so what do we know? Go back 2 years in 2008. Huge. Huge economic downturn. Everybody was in crisis. There was a time where every male member of my family was unemployed during that time period, myself included. And I'd never been without a job from the time I graduated high school until 2008. I'd never been without a job. And it was upsetting and shocking. And you just know there were other guys that were in that way. So we saw that big bump. Well, now we're about just past the 2-year mark of COVID, of 2020 hitting, and now we're going to, a lot of people were out of work. A lot of people lost jobs. A lot of people still haven't gone back. I know the news says one thing, but I raise an eyebrow towards it. And I know Bob does as well. I can see his eyebrows on screen right now. And, I mean, it's very possible that we're going to lose some guys because they've got financial issues now. We need to keep an eye out for the guys that suddenly stop showing up.
But we shouldn't, because, Maynard, from being in membership services that we have a sovereign grand commander who has made it.
Yeah.
To me, and I have to say this. I've said it to many people in email, but I got to be honest. Sovereign Grand Commander Cole, to me, from a member's perspective, is likely one of the best things that's happened to the Scottish Rite in my life. I'll say that, and I mean that.
I agree.
But he took the initiative to say that anybody who is behind in their dues because of COVID or because of the economy due to COVID, not because they had COVID, but due to COVID-19, the pandemic, if they can't pay their dues because of that, and they let their valley know, if the valley will waive those dues, the Supreme Council will waive the per capita, so the valley loses nothing, but we don't lose that member.
It is all about brotherhood, and I am so proud to say that Bob Weatherford is my brother. He's a brother to every Scottish Rite Mason and every Freemason listening. If you have, for some reason or another, found yourself disconnected from the fraternity, either from the Scottish Rite or from your Blue Lodge or what have you, drop us a line, podcast@scottishrite.org. And I am telling you here and now, my brother Bob will do everything in his power to help bring you back. He's an extraordinary guy, a truly unsung hero of the Scottish Rite, and I'm so proud that I get to work with him each and every day. So again, if you've got questions, comments, or you know a guy, or you're one of those guys, podcast@scottishrite.org, and we will help you out. That is going to wrap it up for this edition of the Tyler's Place podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And don't forget, if you're interested in joining the Scottish Rite, go to scottishrite.org and check out the join button right there, or send me an email, podcast@scottishrite.org. From Washington, D.C., at the House of the Temple, I'm Maynard Edwards, 32nd Degree KCCH, and we'll catch you next time right here on The Tyler's Place.